This is the Breakaway Podcast, presented by the National Bird Hunting Association. The NBHA's The Breakaway Podcast is brought to you by Purina Pro Plan. Fine-tuned nutrition to promote strength and stamina in the canine athlete and longest-standing supporter of the sport of field trialing nationwide. You can fuel your champion with Purina Pro Plan using various physical and online retailers wherever pet food is sold. Purina Pro Plan. Fuel the champion within. Garmin. Delivering innovative GPS-enabled technology across diverse markets including sports and fitness, outdoor recreation, marine, automotive, and aviation. Garmin. Engineered on the inside for life on the outside. Gun Dog Supply. The leader in training collars, tracking collars, and so much more. Fast, friendly service, great customer support, and the newest gun dog products on the market. Gun Dog Supply. We train our dogs with the products we sell. Mule brand clothing and apparel. Outdoor clothing for all sorts of environments and conditions. From hunters in briars and wading creeks to forestry personnel, farmers, motorcycle riders, and utility workers, Mule is clothing for hunters made by hunters for over 38 years. Find your Mule brand gear at www.okiedogssupply.com. Gun Dog Central. Gun Dog Central is a centralized location for finding your next dog, whether it be a pointing dog, retriever, flusher, versatile breed, hound, terrier, you name it. Gun Dog Central is the place to find your next canine athlete. To find your next champion, visit them at www.gundogcentral.com. onX Hunt, the #1 hunting GPS app. Join the millions of hunters who trust onX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. onX Hunt. Know where you stand. And Park Cities Quail Coalition. Park Cities Quail Coalition is a nonprofit organization run 100% by volunteers who are passionate about sporting traditions and determined to make it available to future generations by working to sustain and restore huntable wild quail populations, to encourage and educate interested youth, and to celebrate the quail hunting heritage. Welcome back for the 11th episode of the second season of the Breakaway Podcast. I'm once again your host, Joe Hopkins. So glad to be back in the podcast saddle and so glad that you have tuned in. If you enjoy this podcast, or even if you're listening for the very first time, please take the time to tell a friend, like, subscribe, and review the channel to help grow and promote the podcast and the sport of field trialing that we all love. Our guest this episode is Rich Robertson Jr., a legendary figure in the field trial community. Spending an entire lifetime in field trials, Richie has earned more than 260 championships across 17 states and 2 Canadian provinces within multiple sanctioning bodies. His legacy includes handling 64 separate dogs in 32 national championship appearances, with 2 of his dogs, Tocoa Mountain Sunrise and Hicks Rising Sun, inducted into the Hall of Fame. Richie's impact extends beyond his impressive record. Known for his mentorship, generosity, and willingness to help others, he has played a pivotal role in developing field trial grounds and shaping the careers of many in the sport. His influence is profound, with close to over 90% of setters at the Nationals from 1984 to 2023 either tracing their lineage back to his breeding or benefiting from his handling acumen. But before we get to Richie, besides the presidential campaigns going on, the 2024 and 2025 National Bird Dog Hall of Fame campaigns are well underway, if you can't tell, and I want to touch on very quickly the voting process on the horizon and give you a few tips to ensure that you get your vote casted and you indeed are eligible to vote. So the first thing is you must be a print subscriber to the field put out by the UKC in order to vote. This will be verified at the time of voting in September. Number 2, and please note, online subscriptions are not eligible to vote. Only print subscribers will be eligible to vote. Number 3, there won't be any printed ballots this year. Voting will be conducted solely online with instructions included in the September issue of The Field. Number 4, online voting will take place from September 1st and close on September 30th. And the last point, if you're not subscribed to the Field print version, you can do so at www.shop.ukcdogs.com and cast your vote this September. The Breakaway Podcast also wants to congratulate this past season's Purina Dog of the Year award winners and Hall of Fame inductees, including Mr. David Williams and our guest for this episode, Mr. Rich Robertson Jr. and Pointers, House's Rain Cloud, and True Confidence. We also want to congratulate this year's MBHA Dog and Handler of the Year award winners. You can find a roster of those winners on our website or Facebook page with all of those winners acknowledged, and we also want to congratulate Mr. Greg Blair, his family, and the entire Dale Creek Gun Dogs team of Tom Waite and Andrea Ward for the induction of setter male Blair's Witch Project into the National Bird Hunters Association Hall of Fame. Congratulations, everyone. And new for the second season of the Breakaway Podcast, we want to make you aware of a new segment called What's the Point?, where we take your listener-submitted questions and try to answer them the best we can to enlighten, enrich, and engage new and seasoned field trialers alike with answers about everything field trialing and bird dogs. So message us on Facebook or email your bird dog, field trial, animal husbandry, breeding, and training-related questions for a chance to hear them answered on an episode of the podcast. And this episode's question comes from Derek from Arizona, and Derek writes, Joe, I have a 7-year-old English pointer that is a great hunting dog, but I know he could probably never run at the ranges you discussed for field trials in previous episodes. My question is, how do you train a dog to run at those ranges required of the various trial types for horseback and walking trials? Big fan of the podcast. Keep the episodes coming. Good question, and thank you for the question, Derek. And some may disagree a little with me on this, but I don't feel like you train a dog to run at a specific range. You definitely can encourage one to run out a little bit farther by pushing it, and you can definitely tighten one up by various means, but I feel like the dog itself and its genetics and its natural tendencies dictate at what range that dog is going to be comfortable and more effective at. I can't say that I breed a litter or buy a dog and just decide I'm going to make this dog an all-age dog. I'm going to make this dog a shooting dog, because what if that dog inherently has a very tight range and it likes to quarter real sharp or just stay naturally closer to you by nature? And yeah, you can push him out a little bit farther on an ATV or horse and try to get him to stretch their legs a little bit more, if he or she even will, but there is a good chance that that dog is going to be what he or she will be range-wise. And that's why the different formats exist for this very reason, to accommodate different dogs and different handlers. For example, if you live in or love the grouse woods and have dogs, the cover dog trials are going to knock you square between the eyes and be just for you. Or if you have horses and have bird dogs, the format for you is going to be horseback trials. It's going to fit you perfectly. Or if you don't have horses, but you definitely have high quality bird dogs, you're going to love walking stakes. Those are going to be perfect for you. And as for the dog itself, Derek, the various formats more or less exist to accommodate the different types of dogs and their ranges. Some dogs have a tendency to run bigger than others. Some dogs have a tendency to pattern or quarter tighter than some other dogs. And our all-age circuits exist to accommodate those dogs with extreme range that like to grab an edge and run into the horizon out of sight. And our shooting dogs may be a little bit tighter as compared to all-age dogs. Maybe they have a little closer handle on them, but even those dogs still yet have a great determination to run out for what the country allows. And that's also a big component too, is the ground itself. If the country you're running in has 500 to 800 yard lines and edges, judges want to see that all-age dog more or less run to the extents of those grounds, while the shooting dog, you should still exhibit a good range, a good healthy range, and get out there well off the course to birdie objectives and cover, but not necessarily as extreme as the all-age dogs typically do. And when I'm judging, I pay particularly close attention to the grounds that we're running on and ask myself after each brace, did this dog run to what the country allowed for and what's called for the type of stake or dog that it is? Some grounds lay out better for other types of dogs. That piece of ground with a lot of edges and woods and tight 90-degree turns probably better suited for a shooting dog or a walking dog that will cut it up nicely going forward. And that big open rangy piece of ground with field edges and wood edges that run out of sight, probably a better place to show that big run and that all-age dog going off into the horizon. And since this is the maiden voyage of this segment, Kathy writes in on Facebook, as a breeder evaluating 7-week-old poodle pups, what are a few things that would help to ID a potential bird dog? Good question, Kathy. Listen, my opinion, 7-week-old puppies, there's not a lot to ascertain from that. They're kind of a blank canvas, a lot of unknowns. What you can look for and pay attention to is how they move. Are they fancy going? Are they bold? Are they scared of things? Are they timid? You pay attention to the real basics basic functions of personalities at that age. And still at that, it can be a crapshoot. But as that dog ages and they start to get into that 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 week age, then you start to see a lot of the intangibles start to come out. You start to see that dog paying attention to butterflies and birds and things floating around. And if they really hone in on that stuff, and especially if they try to point it, then you might be well on your way to a bird dog or a dog that enjoys getting after birds. My advice, Kathy, don't worry about it at 7 or 8 weeks old. Let that dog mature, let it grow, let it learn, take it on puppy walks, introduce it slowly to things that will be a part of its daily life. If that's gunfire, if that's the flapping of wings, and if that's the banging of a feed pan. Get that dog ready for those things here and now, for those things are going to be a part of its daily life, and then let's monitor how that dog progresses and grows to see what intangibles it may have as a bird dog. Thank you for your question, Derek. And Kathy, if you would like to hear your question answered on an episode of the podcast, write into us at joehopkins7@gmail.com. That's JOEHOPKINS, the number 7@gmail.com, or message us on Facebook with your question for a chance to hear it answered on the podcast. So with that, and without further ado, let's welcome in our guest, Mr. Rich Robertson Jr. Joining me now on the Breakaway Podcast, what a privilege it is to have Hall of Fame handler, Hall of Fame trainer, breeder, and anything else field trial dog related, Mr. Rich Robertson Jr. Rich, how's it going, man?
Very well, very well. It's a good evening and ready to do this with you. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, my email, my inbox, and all that has just been flooded with people. When's the podcast coming back? Field trial season starting up. I've got a lot of drives ahead of me. I got a lot of rodent hours ahead of me. I need something to listen to, and I've had a lot of time here in the off season to think about how we want to kick this off and what kind of personnel and stories and experiences. And I got to be honest, I told some of the guys when I was kicking some ideas around to have on, I'm going to self-indulge with this one. I'm going to get one of what I feel like is my people, Mr. Rich Robertson. I mean, as a kid, Rich, I could not get enough of Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. I had hunting dogs with TMS blood, and I just wanted more and more and more stories. I was looking for articles and all that. So when I'm sitting here on the other side of this microphone with you, 18-year-old, 17, 16-year-old Joe gets a little bit bubbly. So if I sound like a fanboy, just calm me down a little bit, because I got a lot of ground I want to cover with you, a lot of ground. But for our listeners, Rich, that are meeting you for the very first time, tell me where you're at, where you're located, what you do now, what services you offer, and what Rich Robertson's up to at this point in time.
Well, I live in Payette, Idaho, and I'm still training bird dogs. Done it my whole entire life. In 2016, I decided to step away and spend time with my family. It was time to do it. And I had sold the ranch to Keith and Bobby Richardson, and they're big in the German Shorthair world. So they decided to hire me as their ranch manager to oversee it. And that's what I've done, and my wife and I, for the first time in life, we didn't have to make a plan around a field trial or a work schedule or nothing, So it was kind of unusual at first.
Yeah.
But so now, that being said, I was doing that in 2017. They had their own private trainer and running German Shorthairs, and their trainer had things come up and he left them, and that left them needing a trainer. So I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll help you out until you get somebody hired."
Retirement didn't last very long.
Oh, no. So I've been doing it ever since 2017. And everybody laughs. They said, "I thought you retired." I said, the older I got, not the smarter I got. So, but it's been a fun journey. I now compete the German Shorthairs for the Richardsons, and they get some super nice German Shorthairs.
Nice.
They have me traveling all over the United States again.
Back on the road.
Yep.
And I want to touch on something. We got a lot of ground to cover, Rich, and I got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. But I kind of talked about this with you earlier. You and Jamie and a bunch of other people we've had on here have made special efforts to talk about the family unit and the family part of this field trial life that a lot of us are living or trying to live. And you said in 2016 you made a big decision to go home and be with family and be with your wife and do family things. And one of the things that I find myself dealing with people when they call in and they ask questions and stuff, it's not necessarily how do you get a dog to do this or where should I go to have this experience. It's trying to juggle the home life and where does field trials and dogs fit in with the home life, how much is too much and how much is enough and all that. And you gave some great advice to me earlier before we hit the record button. You said you got to do what you can do. Don't shove a round peg into a square hole. Don't put things that mean a lot and they're very important in a bind so you can go run a dog. Take care of those things, but enjoy the time you have when you do get to run a dog.
Yes. I mean, so, trying to do the bird dog world and include the family. I mean, at every level, the most important thing is keeping your family involved in it and
Right.
not to overload them and burn them out and run them off.
Sure.
And that's the tough part. Try to make it fun for them as much as possible. Make them part of it.
Yeah.
And first of all, family is first. So I mean, but we all sacrifice a lot sometimes to get what we need to get in our career, and it takes an extremely strong partner
Sure.
to stand not behind you, beside you, and walk with you through this.
Yeah, that's very prophetic. That's very true. And you've talked about your wife and how much of a key component it is, a very equal component to yourself in the operation to keep the boat afloat. When you're running a string of dogs and you're all over the country, and especially you at the time, coast to coast. And I know you're probably more centralized now in your travels, still on the road. But if you don't have a good team, all success usually has a really good team behind it, and you've not been short of that in your career.
No, and not just my wife that was with me, my daughters were a big key factor.
Nice.
They went to summer camp and they all worked and they got up at 4:00 in the morning. No, they didn't want to, but they did. And they worked all day long. And, now they're all grown and they say to me, Dad, I kind of miss those days, and that's when you maybe done the right thing and didn't completely burn them out.
Wow. Well, that's good advice, and that's good for our listeners to hear. It kind of breathes a little breath of comfort that, hey, look, take care of things that matter and do this when you can and enjoy it when you can. And Rich, I want to say something about you too. This podcast has kind of come at an awkward time for you, and a lot of us got wind that the ranch that you're on, the Prairie Wind Ranch, tragically and unfortunately caught fire in a lightning storm. And needless to say, and I want you to tell us a little bit about this, it has turned your life upside down a little bit for the time being. And you've lost hundreds of thousands of acres in and around where you're at. I think you told me there for a stretch of days you only had single-digit number of hours of sleep. You've been playing firefighter. You've been playing cattle rescuer, and you've helped your neighbors. And I told myself that this isn't going to work. He's got too much going on. It's too sensitive of a time. And you insisted that you do this, and you insisted because you think that this stuff for our game is important, but our listeners are probably really interested and first and foremost, glad that you're okay. Like, that's a very dangerous situation for you, your family, and your stock, and your neighbors around you. Can you just tell our listeners what happened out there?
Well, we had a thunderstorm roll through and lightning struck and set a fire late in the evening, probably 4 or 5 miles away. And through the night, things were all right. And the next day, the wind changed on us and it started coming to us. And that fire moved so fast through the night, it went from 4 or 5 miles away to a mile away.
Man.
They estimated it was traveling around 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
Coming across the country. And so didn't really sleep that night up because I was watching it anyway. And I laid down for a little bit and got up, and 1:00 in the morning, we were on fire. I jumped up, told my wife to start calling the fire department. And I ran up the road to the neighbors, which I knew he was there all by himself, and woke him up because it was right there at his house. And
wow.
We proceeded to fight fire, and family, friends, neighbors, we all come together because that's what it took. And I mean, kids that, but they're not kids, people that grew up with my daughters now that have family, they all came in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And I had family members and friends that stayed with me for 2 days and didn't go to work. They called in and told their work that family comes first.
Unbelievable.
We have a fire. So that's, that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And I mean, bird dog people came and they fought it right there side to side with me.
That's incredible.
And so that's, it wasn't just, I mean, when I say family, I'm talking family all the way through, from the bird dog family to just family.
Extended family.
Yeah. And so that's what it's about. And, like my wife and I said, we survived barely our home, but we still have a place to lay our head down.
Well, I want to say on behalf of everybody, first and foremost, so glad that you and your family are okay, and that's the main thing. I know you've had a lot of people that's had you and your family in their thoughts and prayers. All of this type stuff, especially tragedy, puts things into perspective. And I think perspective that you have, and it says a lot about your character, is you didn't want to back out of this. You said this is important, and I want to get on here and tell the stories and have a conversation and stuff. And I think people are really going to appreciate that. And one thing that I can hear resonating through this is, I'm thinking about all the people and the faces and the names, the camaraderie that I have networked in field trialing. And these are the type people that would drive hundreds of miles to help me with a flat tire, or they would be there to help me do something at the house or whatever. And all I have to do is ask. And those are the type of friendships that endure and last for a lifetime. They're not superficial. They're really deeply rooted things. And it's funny because it all comes down for the love of a bird dog, but that goes to show you the kinetic fabric that is in this game that we have.
Well, that's, even still this day, I'm getting phone calls from people in the field trial world. They said, if you need me there, I'll get on a plane or I'll drive there, and you just tell me what you need me to do for you.
Wonderful.
And that's, that's how our bird dog world should be.
Yeah. And
I believe it is. I believe everybody comes together. Y'all want to win, but when it comes to tragedy, we all come together.
Amen. That's really well said. And this instance and your testimony with it is a testimony to that, the camaraderie and the network, the community that is the field trialers. And we're a special breed. We love our animals and we do things that people may not understand, but there's a connection there that we can't explain to people. And one thing that I do want you to explain, though, is you've been in field trials and you've been around bird dogs. I asked you this earlier and you couldn't even tell me. It's just been, you said, it's my life. It's been my life.
I don't ever remember. The first dog I ever remember being on our family was a bird dog, a pointer female.
Wow. That's awesome. So tell me, I mean, there's a question here that I ask everybody, and I don't know how you're going to answer it, but do your best. How did Rich Robertson get started in bird dogs? I mean, if he just grew up around it and it was a part of the air he breathed, was it hunting dogs? Was it field trial dogs? Tell me about what life looked like as a young Rich Robertson.
Well, like I said, I grew up in it. My dad had bird dogs. We were always hunters. And then he decided to start going to a few field trials, and that's where it all started. And I can remember as a tiny kid going to field trials with my dad, and it's a big change from today's world. We all slept in the back end of a pickup, and if it poured down rain, he pulled the tarp over the top of us. We didn't have a canopy. That was our canopy.
I don't imagine the parking lot would be too full of the field trial now if we had to sleep in the bed of the pickup trucks with a tarp.
So that was my introduction. Like I said, I as far back as I can remember, I mean, going to field trials as a little kid. So, and then my dad, he turned pro. I think he turned pro in 1968, I think it was, and started training dogs for the public. And back then, so the rule was that if you were a pro, any of your immediate family members were pros. So that made me be a pro when I was 12 years old.
12-year-old pro.
So at 12 years old, I had to run against in the open stakes. I didn't get to run an amateur.
Oh, man.
So I came in full throttle, I guess.
So Rich Robertson goes to the line and his feet can't reach the stirrups, and he's got a dog at the end of the whistle, but he's ready to rock and roll at 12 years old.
Yep. And my dad, he had his running dogs when we were young like that. Like I said, that's that family bond to bring the next generation in.
Hey, Rich, can you remember what the first field trial you attended where you've got, material memories of where it was at and what it was or where it was at or maybe some of the dogs? Can you remember?
My first one?
Yeah. Were you in the womb?
It was there in California.
Nice.
And, back then it was before it was populated. And I remember as a little kid going to a place, it was called the Medallion Gun Club, and it was in Southern California outside of Bakersfield.
Nice.
Well, there was lots of people down there that belonged to that, and it was all native country and loaded with California valley quail. And it was like something like 10,000 acres.
Wow.
And that's where they run field trials, and there was nothing but wild birds. There was no planet birds. And so that's probably, like early on remembering it. I've got a picture in my office here that I kind of cherish. And it's a black and white photo, and it was taken when I was 16 years old. And my dad took me out of high school, and they had what they call the Arizona Shooting Dog Championship down in Kingman, Arizona.
Okay.
Well, during that time, this is in the 70s, in Nevada, they had started what is now the Northwest Chucker Championship.
Yes.
But they had started an all-age classic and a shooting dog classic. Nevada, the town of Nevada, they guaranteed $10,000 for a purse win in the 70s, early 70s.
Wow.
Which was a lot of money then.
Oh, big time.
So a lot of trainers would come to this Arizona Shooting Dog Championship to get their dogs on the ground because it was kind of similar.
Mm-hmm.
And to go to that. And in this picture, it's a black and white. And my dad's in it. And some of the people in this picture, it's going to blow you away. And they're all young. And some of them in the picture is Payette.
Wow.
Tom Smith, Rick Smith, Dean Lord, and then some, a lot of the trainers from the West Coast.
Unreal. In that one photo, black and white photo.
I sent this to Bernie quite a few years ago, and I'm not in the picture. And I told Bernie, I says, I was just a pup. Those were the old dogs, and they were going to let this pup in the picture.
That's a picture that almost or probably should belong in the museum one day. I mean, all those names and.
Oh yeah. So, like I said, I was 16 years old. He took me out of school for a week.
Nice.
And he said, this will be the best education he can ever get.
Wow. That's incredible.
I believe so. And I believe it was.
That's awesome. And I just did the conversion. $10,000 back then, $40,000. That's $40,000 in today. So that was a lot of money back then. That was a big purse.
It was huge. And like I said, the likes of like Payette and Rick Smith and Tom Smith, and Dean Lord had come all that way.
That's awesome. Hold on to that picture. There's someday a lot of people are going to benefit from that photo. I
look at this photo. I told Rick, I said, Rick, I got a photo. I said, we're the end of the lives, you and Tom, and the rest of them are all gone.
You guys are the pillars of time now.
Him and I just laugh about it. So.
Oh, that's good. That's rich. That's really good. You've talked so much about your dad, Rich, and I want you to riff on your dad because I don't know that a lot of our listeners, our seasoned listeners, will know this, but you and your dad, your careers overlapped for a good part of time in your ongoing career. I believe in the 70s and 80s, your dad and your careers overlapped, and you were talking about stats and some of the stuff that's happened over your career, and maybe some of it's a little hard to delineate because your dad is Rich Robertson and you're Rich Robertson Jr., but if it wasn't delegated to one or the other, it was just Rich Robertson.
Correct. I grew up, like I said, I grew up helping my dad. I scouted, and until he had some heart conditions is when he stepped away from competing the dogs, and I took the string over. And when he handed it over to me, I said, I'm not going to just trial on the West Coast. I said, I want to go nationwide.
Wow.
And, I said, I want to run all the way across the United States. we'd already went to Canada some already. And so he said, well, it's your string, do what you want to do. So I had a lot of owners that thought that probably wasn't the best move in my life. And some of them stepped away.
What did your dad think about that, Rich?
Well, he stood behind me.
Wow. I mean, I can see that. I can see that being a major unknown, that the rig is going to go coast to coast now, and the variables that go into that, let alone the dogs, the travel and the logistics and the planning and stuff. I can see where a lot of people in your camp are like, hey, take a second and think about this. This is not just a drive down the road.
I think I was 23 years old.
Wow. Wow. I just can't imagine making that big of a decision. But the right guy was in your corner.
Right. And so, like I said, few of the people walked away from me. But like I've always said, don't ever burn those bridges. You may need to cross them. We always remained friends.
Nice.
Even though they took their dogs and put them with other people, we stayed friends.
That's the way it should be. And you, Rich, you've had owners. I mean, it's one thing to be from where you're at on that side of the country, and you naturally would have owners over there. But you had a plethora of owners on the East Coast, too. And some of the dogs that are in your history annuals, I mean, you've got as many East Coast owners as you do West Coast owners.
Oh, correct. And then I had owners from Canada later on, and I had, clientele from Japan later on.
Yeah. Wow.
So, we remained good friends, and he took his dogs and put them with another trainer, which was all good. And we always stayed friends. And when I won my first big trial down south, which was the Pelican with Tocoa Mountain Sunrise, my very first call was not to anybody but him. And I said to him, I said, Jack, you remember our conversation about when I told you I was going to go south and win, and you told me that I would never win down there? And I said, I told you, you're right if I don't ever go. And I went. I said, guess what? He says, you won one, didn't you? I said, yep.
Oh,
he said,
awesome.
I knew it. He said, I knew if any person that was determined to do it, it was you.
That's amazing. That's so cool. What a cool story. And I'm just thinking about the leap of faith it took and the commitment to the work that it would take to keep the rig intact coast to coast and to make those plans and to coordinate things. And you've got to stop places along the way and air out dogs and horses and all the things. And here again, another good point as to why a team really does matter. And you may not consider them a part of your team, but if you have a friend that lives in Missouri and you need to stop overnight and you get to stay at their place and air out your animals, that's somebody that's on your team. And that's almost invaluable.
Yeah. Well, when I decided to do it, Alex Mock, he's been the Tocoa Mountain Setters early on.
Yes.
He jumped in that truck with me and we left.
Wow.
We were in our early 20s, and there was a lot of times that we didn't know how we was going to put fuel in the truck. And there was a lot of times when we didn't need a whole lot. So,
a lot of Vienes consumed, I'm gonna assume, and stuff like that.
But him and I, we're still very close friends to this day, and we laugh about when we were younger and how we survived.
Nice. And Alex still breeding high caliber quality setters and still going strong. And that's so cool to have that connection between you two and still doing it, and we can talk about those things. Rich, we're in a really unique part of the season here, and a lot of your colleagues will say this is the better part of the season even if it is on the front end, and that's the prairie training season. We've got trainers and amateurs sprinkled out all over the prairies in your neck of the woods and all over the Midwestern and Western parts of the country right now, and they're getting dogs ready. And I'd imagine there's nobody better to ask about the integral necessity or the functional utility of the prairies and the field trial dog. Can you just tell our listeners what the prairie has meant to the field trial dog and to you in your career?
Well, going to the prairie and taking them when they're young and putting them in all them wild birds is the foundation, the beginning of a great dog. And the bond that you will create between you and that dog working on the prairie, a positive work, lots of birds, endless hours of work, and just having the weather and the country to do it. The dog will teach himself with the right stuff.
Right.
And then you will learn a lot of stuff too. And the prairie is so important, so important. I mean, I went for a lot of years in Canada. I had a summer camp in Alberta, and I mean, it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
Wow.
And I mean, the dogs you develop and the bond you create with those dogs will last forever.
Yeah, and a guy told me the other day, it's kind of the baptism by fire for especially young dogs. You get to throw them into the pool, and all the things are there for them. And they get multiple bird contacts a day, and not just a day, the next day, the next day. And you get to find out what those dogs have motor-wise. Are they a dog that wants to touch the horizon? Or are they a dog that's going to do other things? And you get to see all that there.
Well, they will sort themselves out running there to what level they need to be at, whether it be a great foot hunting dog or a horseback dog.
Right.
That's where you'll find the true dog is putting him down on the prairie and see him do that.
Is that what a lot of owners are really after too when they put their dogs, especially their young dogs, their derby age dogs on a truck? Is, they want to get training and they want to get repetition and they want to get them on the ground and get them in shape and all that tangible stuff. But are we really just trying to find out, hey, where is this dog going to fit? Like, what does he want to do? What's he good at? What's he effective at? Do the prairies really bring all that out?
That should be the number one priority, to send that dog there to see where he's going to fit in. And if he's not going to fit your program, send him to somebody that will make a great hunting dog.
Yeah.
Or a great, whatever, So that's what should be accomplished on the prairies.
Yeah. And somebody like you that's so close to the Canadian ties of the sport, Canadian clients, you've won countless trials in the Canadian prairies, and Canada's a very, very close thing in your field trial heart for obvious reasons, but we've unfortunately lost the Canadian trials and the Canadian ties there. How big of an effect will this have? How big a deal is this for our game, Rich, for those people that have no idea the interweavings that the Canadian prairies has on the field trial game?
Well, unless you've experienced, it's hard to explain that what you'll see in the dogs that came from that. But also, I've had the opportunity to talk to some Canadians. They're still friends of mine up there. And like here, times are changing there. And the big, vast prairies are no longer there. And they fenced them off and broke them up. So there's a lot of change like everywhere, but it was such a huge part of developing dogs and helping the breed no matter what it was. Because that, like I said, you would sort them out up there and know what you had. They would sort themselves out because you put them on the ground enough and in enough birds. You knew you either had something or you didn't.
Right. And one thing that you've had is an unbelievable roster of dogs. Unbelievable. And I just want to mention some of these names here. Names like Rapidan, names like Audubon, Tocoa Mountain Hope, Tocoa Mountain Nikki, Miss Mona, Brick Church Sundrop, Desert Rambler, Pacesetters Equinox, Tommy B, owned by good friend Dr. Brown, T's Gunrunner, Skid Row Joe, Audubon Americus, White Powder Grip, and the list goes on and on and on. What goes through your mind, Rich, when you look back at that proverbial shed row of all that great talent and those superstars that you've had your hands on, or you've bred, or you've guided across the prairies or in the piney woods? What does that make you feel like?
Well, it makes my heart feel full. And, when I sit in my office, I got pictures around here and scrolls and stuff. And I'm like, I take it all in when I'm sitting here. I'm like, it's been a good life.
Wow.
It's been fun to make an impact in the bird dog world, whether it be what breed it is, setters, pointers, I got titled the setter man because I won so much,
Yeah.
but I have had some great pointers.
You have.
Great pointers, they have had an impact on the breed too.
Absolutely.
I mean, take like Riverton's fun-seeking Scooter. He's had such a big impact, in the field trial game. I mean, he's produced some phenomenal dogs, produced Hall of Fame dogs, and and their offspring is produced. So I feel good to be part of it. And I also feel good because he helped get some young trainers on track, like Jamie Daniels,
Yeah.
Tommy Rice. Those guys, their genetics go back to dogs, either directly out of Scooter or second generation.
Very much so. Jamie's in that vein of rebel blood, and their Scooter is by Funseeker's Rebel, who Fred won the national with, and Jamie had his hands on in the early part of his career, and it's helped build his career too.
Correct. Well, that's, so Scooter's dam was a female called Riverton's Black Eyed Pea, and she was pretty phenomenal.
6-time champion.
And the young man that owned her, he brought her to me when she was like 3 years old, and he said, I want to show you this dog, see if she's worth campaigning. So we ran her. I was like, yeah, she's got potential. And he'd be like, well, you don't seem too excited. I said, well, we get her broke. I think she can win. And he's like, what do you mean get her broke? I got her broke already. I said, not the kind of broke I need. So, and she did, and she went on. And Fred DeLeo just loved her. She was gritty. She was gritty. On the prairies up there, it could be 110 degrees. She didn't care. She was going to run and point birds.
Nice.
And so when I helped Fred win the national with Funseeker's Rebel, when I scouted for him,
right,
I said, Fred, when Pete comes in, Matt Coverdale, he said, I want a breeder and you're in charge of it. He said, you pick the stud dog you want a breeder to. So when I helped Fred win the national with Funseeker Rebel, I'd already helped him down in Florida and Georgia and stuff. And I'd helped Fred, all through his career. And I said, Fred, I want to breed P to Tyson. He looked at me, he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He said, you better get me a puppy out of it. I said, it's a done deal. That's how much he thought of her.
Wow. That's all. And that's been one of the great nicks in our stud book is that Rebel nick, Funseeker's Rebel over Riverton's Black Eyed Pea. And that Scooter is the sire of national champion Dominator's Rebel Air, Hall of Famer champion Just Irresistible, Fun-Seeking Hitman, Little Willow, Painted Oahe Mac, and so many more.
It just goes on and on.
Yeah. And this is awesome about Scooter. 3 out of 6 puppies from Scooter's litter won 5 championships and 3 runner-up championships.
Right.
and he littermate Scooter's debutante won the National Amateur Championship, and littermate Youngstown Thrill Seeker won the California Bird Dog Championship. Now, I say that to say this. Scooter, here's another one of your dogs that had an East Coast owner. At least one of them was an East Coast owner. But these dogs, the progeny here, they won on both coasts. They could get it done anywhere.
Right. Well, and that's, like I said, I could win prairies, West Coast, East Coast, down deep South, whatever. But that's back to that commitment of endless hours and days and months of living on the road, and, family sacrificing for me to do it, is a big part. And the friendship the bird dog world created for me and opened doors for me to have places to work was huge.
Cool.
Huge.
Very cool.
And I remember in 1984 when I went to Grand Junction for the very first time in my life, and I pulled in there, and not at the National, but I had some friends down there. I pulled in there and I went into Dunn's Supply.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even know what that is.
No, it was a legendary place down there, right?
And so it was an Ace Hardware store, what it was, that had a dog supply stuff in it. And Mr. Wilson Dunn owned it. And I walked in that door, and he greeted everybody at the front door with a handshake.
Nice.
He asked me, he said, what are you doing here? And I told him. So we talked, and he told one of the employees, said, whatever he needs, you help him find what he needs in here. Well, when I walked out of that store, he said, you got any place to work dogs around here? I said, no, sir, not yet. I'm looking. He said, meet me at the cafe in the morning. And I met him at the cafe. We had breakfast. He said, jump in the truck with me. We went out just outside of town there. He said, open that gate. I opened that gate, and we pulled back in there. He said, all this in here, he said, you can work dogs on.
Wow.
He said, close the gate behind you when you're done. And that was, like I said, people like that extending their hand and giving me places to work. It's lifetime experience. And I have tried to do that myself because of people that was so generous to me in my life.
Sure.
And, if we all don't pay it forward in this bird dog world,
there you go.
It's going to disappear. And nobody can be too big. Everybody should give.
Exactly. Nobody that has had anybody pour into them wants to keep it all for themselves. If you've had somebody help you give to you, train you, help you, lift you up, you'll naturally want to give that back. And that's one thing that's been said about you in rounds and rounds is the mentorship and the generosity and all the stuff that you've done for dog and man. But Rich, nobody arguably has done more maybe for your career. And then definitely, without argument, the setter breed is Hall of Famer and 11-time champion Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. I'll just tell you, as a kid that was trying to save up every nickel he had so he could buy an orange and white setter with Tocoa Mountain Sunrise written somewhere on the paperwork. I mean, it didn't matter. And all you had to do was just tell me Tocoa Mountain Sunrise was somewhere. And I was probably going to bust the piggy bank and try to come get that dog or that puppy.
Right.
And one thing I want to say about Tocoa Mountain Sunrise before I turn you loose on him, there are so many champions and good dogs in our game, in our history books, and a lot of good sires. But few, unlike Tocoa Mountain Sunrise, very few become their own culture. He kind of carved out his own culture. He was the picture of the breed. What did this dog mean to you in your career? Can you tell us a little bit about Tocoa Mountain Sunrise and his impact?
Well, he helped me climb that ladder from a young man to where I'm at today because he was so intelligent. He was so easy. Bill Hunt and I had a conversation one time, and he had a dog that was a Hall of Fame dog. And he said, when we turn these dogs loose, he said, they don't give us 100%. They give us 110% every time. And I said, you're exactly right, Bill. And those kind of dogs like that are very far and few between. I mean, that's what sets them aside from any other dog in their breed. And not just that they can perform, the ones that can do it, the ones that can produce. And that's what he done. And, there's not very many true stud animals, and I don't care what it is, right. Dogs, horses, whatever, that stamp themselves in their genetic pool, no matter what you bred to them.
You and I talked about this earlier today. When I'm looking at yearlings, when I'm looking at dogs, one of the things that I really key in on that has boded me well is I want to see that sire or that damn sire stamp that stock. And Tocoa Mountain Sunrise, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, you could pick one out from a mile away. He stamped every one of them. All the Tocoa Mountain Sunrise dogs I had, all orange and white, all built like him. The genetics, potent wasn't even the word. It was something different about him. He replicated himself. 31 lifetime wins, 270 winners sired with 1,777 progeny wins. And that's the best I can do estimate-wise. This dog's reach goes into the annals of time.
I don't think there'll ever be, and I hope there is, but I don't ever think there will be another setter like him in my lifetime. I hope there is, but I don't know if there will be. Because he was a gift. He was a gift to the bird dog world. So when he was young, Dr. Stephen Asher owned him. And so I'll kind of give you a quick story how he came about in picture. So Dr. Asher was a bird hunter. That's what he was. And we were training some gun dogs for him that wasn't much for him. He'd turn them loose and they'd just leave him. And so he had about had enough. So he came to we told him, come to the kennel. We'll show you some dogs that you can hunt over. These dogs won't ever make it for you. And he said, okay. So he came and showing him dogs walking down through the kennel. Pretty soon realized that he wasn't coming along and looked back, and he's standing in front of Tocoa Mountain Sunrise's kennel. And he was just a young pup then. He said, well, what about this dog? I said, oh, he's a field trial dog. He's not for you. And he said, well, what do you mean a field trial dog? So explained to him what it was because he didn't have a clue. So said, set it up for to go out the next day to show him some dogs for hunting dogs. He said, how about throwing that pup in? I said, well, he's not for sale. But we put him in, went out there and worked dogs. He said, well, can I see him too? And so worked him, and he said, I want him. I said, well, he's not for sale. He said, well, I want him. So needless to say, the almighty dollar spoke.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So he bought him, but he didn't buy him for a field trial dog.
Oh, really?
He bought him for a hunting dog.
Oh my gosh. You're telling me we were this close to not having that dog and that influence in our
Oh, yeah.
pedigrees. He could have been just a meat dog.
Yeah. And so then I'm like, I got to figure something out real quick. So I'm like, so he took him and hunted him a little bit when he was a puppy. And my dad went with him and they'd hunt him. So I get ready to go to Canada that summer. And, he was a coming derby. And I said, the best thing in the world for this dog will be to go to Canada and let me work him all summer. And he'll be just right for you to go in hunting season. So he said, well, let me think about it. Fine. He gave in. He said, okay, I'll do that. I said, I'll be back for you to hunt him this hunting season. So I took him up there and I started working him. I said, kept him updated. In those days, there was no cell phones or stuff like that. So I talked him into letting me run him in a trial. And I ran him in a trial and he placed. And then I came home and they had a little trial here and I ran him in it and won with him. So I said, this dog got a lot of potential. He said, well, he's my hunting dog. I said, I got dogs you can hunt with. I'll just give them. So that's what I did. And then that started Sunrise's career and that started Dr. Asher's career.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that. That's unbelievable that it was that close to not even happening.
But what's and he appreciated this dog. He loved this dog and appreciated him so much. And he was a great client. And he was early on in Sunrise's career when he was hitting it pretty hard early. He was offered a pretty big chunk of money.
Really?
From Japan. When Japan was people there were big in the bird dog world.
Yes.
And he was offered a huge sum of money. And I thought this is as good as you could ever put it. And he said, he turned it down. And he said, he says, I owe it to the setter world for him to stay here.
Wow.
And he said, I feel that he said to me, I don't own the dog. The setter world owns him. My name's on the paper, but he has so much for the setter world. He said, if I let him go to Japan, we will lose. And he was 100% right.
Rich, it's like a good song. A song gets to a point where it belongs to the people when it's so good and it envelops itself into culture. I mean, it becomes a folk song. Tocoa Mountain Sunrise belonged to the field trial world. He was too important, and to have the reserve and the discipline and that intuition to turn down a sum of money that I can only imagine and bank on the fact that the dog's going to make a difference. It's a fairy tale story, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And like I said, we're to this day, Dr. Asher and us, we still are extremely close friends, and he's not in the field trial world anymore, but he's still an avid bird hunter. And he said it introduced me and opened doors for me that I never would have seen in my life.
That's unreal. That's so cool. And to think that it almost didn't get off the ground. That's
yeah.
And
yeah. A lot of people, but to me, that's the most, and one of the things that I think is hurting the sport today is that a lot of people don't have the time for the hunter.
That's true.
That's where the field trial people come from, the bird hunter.
That's exactly right.
And that's where my clientele came from. I mean, the owner of Hicks Rising Sun, he was a foot hunter. He wasn't a field trialer.
Right.
And, it just goes on. And that's, to me, that's the way I was raised. And you cultured those people. They may not, it wasn't about field trialing. It was about bird hunters. And then they would see that field trial dog and they're like, I'd kind of like to have one like that.
Yeah.
But you got to take the time. I don't care who you are, trainers, whatever. You have to take that time out and welcome any newcomer, any bird hunter, because they're all potential field trialers down the road.
You never know when you're dealing with the next owner that might have some of the bigger breed influencers going forward, or the next best handler or trainer, or the next amateur that shakes up the world if you'll just spend a little time and maybe lend them a horse or give them your ear or take them to a trial.
Right. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And that's how the sport, that's how you grow the sport. But I think that's where we're missing some today. that, I mean, our whole world has got busy and nobody takes time out
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
sit and talk. And,
Right.
I got a young man here that down the road that is wanting to get into it. And he called me up and I said, you come and visit with me in the evening and we'll talk. He said, really? I said, yeah. And when he left, I handed him training stuff. He says, what I owe you? I said, nothing, not a
Oh,
thing.
wow. Cool.
And he's like, no, I have to pay you. I said, no, you don't have to pay me. I said, the bird dog world has been extremely good to me. And this is my way of paying it forward. And this is what we have to do.
Exactly. And we've circled right back around to that paying forward principle where somebody paid it forward for Rich Robertson Jr. and now
Yep.
he pays it forward to others. And that's how it should work, because you never know
Yep.
when you're going to start the next, person that's a staple in the game, or a contributor, or a leader, or a breeder, or any of that stuff. You just never know where
Right.
that's going to come from. And it may be on you to get that person in the saddle for the first time, or take them
Oh,
to
yeah.
a walking trial or whatever. And one of the things that I love about Tocoa Mountain Sunrise, to get back to him real quick, he competed at the Nationals in 88, 90, 89, 91, and 92. And he was a staple at the Nationals. And no, he didn't win it, but I feel like he was the top.
He had some unbelievable performances.
Yeah,
there.
I was getting ready to say there's no doubt that he wasn't knocking on the door in a majority of those. But it's the dogs that have a tendency to find themselves on the big stage like him consistently are the ones that you really need to hone in on. The really special ones. I mean, he got runner-up at the Continental, and I think in 92 in a big 70 dog entry. And that's a place that's hard to win as itself, but setters don't own a lot of real estate at that championship. And that's just unbelievable stuff to me.
But not during that time.
Sure, right.
I mean, it was a different time, and it was a little harder for a setter to win back then. It was, I mean, you had to get it done, and he was one of them. But I mean, not just him, his son, Hicks Rising Sun, he produced. They were only a year and a half apart in age.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. Talk to me a little bit about, because this inevitably had to happen, Rich. Was it hard on you, or the owners, or the dog itself, that it had to that Hicks Rising Sun, who's in the Hall of Fame too, 10-time champion, son of Sunrise, that he had to maybe compete in his shadow a little bit?
Oh, he did. He did. He competed in the shadow. And there was a few times that I thought, well, I thought he beat his dad.
He's
but
beat Daddy today.
But that's all right. I mean, he was a good contender. I mean, and he won all over. I mean, I won the Mississippi Championship with Hicks Rising Sun.
Yep.
I had flew down there for the Invitational and ran him in it.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And the Mississippi Championship was running right after it. So I ran over to the Huffmans and I ran him in it. And Larry Huffman helped me. And then they used to announce top dog of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ran the first day and they named him top dog. And there were still several days left to run. I mean, I can't remember the entry. It was like 40 or 50 dogs. And so I said, I got to go back home. I got to trial. I got to be out in California in a couple of days.
Wow.
So I jumped on the plane, flew home, and everybody's like, are you leaving? I said, yeah. They said, well, you're sitting on top. I said, well, yeah. They said, well, you going to leave? I said, well, that shouldn't make a difference. And they said, you need to stay and protect your interests. I said, well, if I'm not going to get it, I'm not going to get it. And for me to sit around here for a couple more days is not going to change the final decision.
Mm.
And they're all, the other trainers like, I can't believe you're leaving. I said, well, I am. So I came home. It was a couple of days later. I'm in my truck driving to the next trial, going to California. When Piper Huffman called me, she says, you won it.
Wow.
So, I mean, and it makes you feel good. I mean, you know when you've done an outstanding job.
Yeah. I mean, you're confident in it. You really, you don't even care what the result is, because you know that the dog did what he had to do and all he could do.
Well, when like I said, Larry Huffman was helping me, and that's his home grounds.
Oh yeah.
And I remember he told when he had to call point on him, standing way in there, and the one find that defied everything else. He had other bird work, but I remember riding up there, and Larry says, "Damn it," because he knew that was the nail in the coffin right there.
Yeah, he knew everybody was playing for second.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. That's all. And look, here's another string of familiarity here. Hicks Rising Sun, son of Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. Hicks Rising Sun competed at the National in 94, 95, 96, 97. Here again, this setter, stamped by his sire in both aesthetics and performance, finds his way to the big stage. 27 lifetime placements, 64 winners sired, and 217 progeny wins. He himself, and this probably gets lost, Rich, in the shuffle of things because Tocoa Mountain Sunrise is just so prevalent. He himself, really, really, really good and great sire. And sired dogs like Southwind Mike, who went on to be, more or less an influencer in the breed. And this thing just keeps rolling over on itself and replicating itself, doesn't it?
Well, and talking about competing in the shadow of his sire, he also bred in the shadow of his sire.
Oh, the good brood females went to Tocoa Mountain Sunrise, and Hicks got the leftovers.
Right. But later in life, people realized how important he was.
Exactly. He's almost just as prevalent in pedigrees and setters as Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. I'd venture to guess you can't hardly find any without him or Tocoa Mountain Sunrise.
Right.
It's amazing.
I'll give you a quick little story about how he come about in Skid Row Joe, because they were litter mates.
Right.
And Tocoa Mountain Zephyr, which was a litter mate. I won the Derby Championship with him, and Japan bought him and took him there.
Wow. So
I was in Punta Gorda, Florida, down there working dogs in the winter.
Punta Gorda, Florida, working dogs. That sounds terrible.
So I was down there in South Florida working dogs, and Alex Mock was down there with me. Very good friend of mine in Canada that lived in the little town where my training camp was going to be down there on vacation. Well, he had a little setter. He had a setter female that he had got from Eddie Tenbrook. And Eddie Tenbrook used to train not far from me. And so I'm down there in South Florida, and I hear through the grapevine that Eddie Tenbrook has Sandhill Sheba down there, and he's going to sell her. Well, my good friend Jack McKenzie owned her.
And this is the dam of Hicks Rising Sun, Sandhill Sheba.
Yeah, the last I had knew from that summer that he was still the owner of her.
Mm.
But I didn't know what had transpired between him and Eddie. I said, when I found out about it, I said, send word to Eddie that I'll buy her. Just tell me how much.
Mm-hmm.
My intention was to buy her and get with Eddie and pick her up. Well, Mr. Jack was down there in South Florida on vacation from Canada in the winter. And he come by where I was at, and we're sitting there having a little drink and talking and having a good time. I said, you ain't going to believe what I done today. He says, what's that? I said, I bought Sandhill Sheba. He said, like hell you did. And so he said, what are you talking about? So I told him, he says, we'll talk tomorrow.
Uh-oh.
And he got up and left, him and his wife. And like I said, we were good friends. Next day, he come and saw me. And I know what he did. He went and had a talk with Eddie. And he says, what do you want to do with her? I said, I want to breed her to Jack. And he knew who Jack was, He says, and raise the puppies? I said, yeah. He said, let me think about this. So we sat there and had some drinks. And he said, you're coming back to Canada this summer again, right? I said, oh, yeah. He lived about 5 or 6 miles from my camp. He said, okay. He said, this is the deal. You take her home with you. You breed her. You raise the puppies. And you get her back to me. I said, done deal. Had I not been in South Florida, Hicks Rising Sun probably never would have existed.
Had you not been in Punta Gorda, Florida, the sun would have never rose for Hicks Rising Sun.
Yeah.
Unreal.
But that's back to like sunrise, sometimes being at the right place at the right time.
That's exactly right. Both of those dogs. And, it's not fair to you, Rich, to pick out just a couple and expound on them, because the list is so heavy with such great talent and such great performers and occupiers of field trial history. And that's just a few of those dogs that have
Right.
made up a part of your career. And that's not even considering like the short hair part of your world that quite frankly and unfortunately I'm not as abreast on, and I don't know that world as fluently, but I have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are diehard GSP people, and they're going to be thrilled to know that you're here, and you know you're in that world now. And I can't, it's hard to wrap my mind around that you have kind of been in both of these worlds and had the success you had. You're probably, though, unfairly thought of as a setter guy for obvious reasons, right? You've had these dogs in the Hall of Fame. You've told me that when you started really nailing it down and, you know, these setters were setting the world on fire, people naturally wanted to send you setters, and you kind of got pigeonholed as the setter guy. But you have trained and handled and bred different breeds, but you started almost entirely with pointers, didn't you?
Correct. Yeah, that's what I had earlier on, was all pointers. Well, I'd have the odd setter or two, but I mean, that's kind of all my early winning was done a lot with majority pointers, not just all setters.
Did you feel like that you were disadvantaged or statistically declined competing with setters, or the majority of setters on the all-age circuit? Did that put you at a disadvantage?
You know, I don't, people, you know, yeah, I don't know if you want to call it a disadvantage. You just, maybe it made me work a lot harder,
Mm.
and the desire to prove them wrong, that with
Oh,
I could beat them with
right.
anything.
And you really had to hone in on your breeding decisions and everything to make all that come together.
Right, right. There was a lot of times that was frustrating, and you just, you know, you regroup and you come back at them, you know,
Nice.
and you can't let, you know, let it push you back, and you can't stand, you know, if you stand back and say, well, maybe they're right, then you're not looking at it the right reason.
Right.
You should be looking at it for the love of whatever dog it is, of proving them wrong, that you can do it, and he can do it, or she can do it.
Well
You know?
said. Yeah, well said. That's that there again, having your priorities straight, even in competition. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're only out there to win, you're going to get your teeth knocked out more times than not. But if you're there to work on something and build something or get better or learn, or even if it's just to enjoy yourself, you don't just ball up and quit or take your ball and go home.
Right.
You keep your head down, you make moves, you change things, and you do all that. One thing, though, that I've always been curious about, because this really doesn't happen anymore, is talk about the difficulties or the complexities, things that maybe people that like me that hop in the truck and the trailer and we drive 45 minutes or a couple hours to trial grounds to compete on a weekend or the championship. Talk about the difficulties and complexities of traveling and competing on both coasts. What did you logistically like have to work out? Say you're in Mississippi one minute, but you got to be back in California the next minute. How did that work?
A lot of sleepless nights.
I imagine.
No, you just, like I said, you just made a plan, and, you know, and living in the bird dog world, there's people everywhere, and keeping them doors open and staying in contact. There was always somebody to bail you out most of the time somewhere, whether it be a hunter or a field trialer. You could make a call and say, "Hey, I have this problem."
And it sounds like you were fortunate enough to be able to fly and make those kind of treks.
Well, not much. Not
Okay,
much.
okay.
Not much. I mean, I flew a little, but not very, very little.
Okay.
Most of it was driving.
Wow. Oh man, your poor truck.
I mean, and back then, you know, the vehicles we drove were not like today's world.
Oh
so.
no, not heated seats and cooled seats and
No,
massage your
no.
back.
You know,
and
there was no cell phones. I laughed about I think it was a year ago, maybe, talking to some of the young pros in the Shorthair game. We were sitting there talking, and I was telling them, about going to Canada and stuff. And I said, you know how we communicated with our clientele? And they said, no. I said, we wrote letters. And they said, what?
Letters.
I said, oh yeah, we wrote letters. We didn't have an internet and we typed stuff.
Right.
We wrote letters.
Wow.
And I said, and in the United States, we talked on phone booths. And they said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I said, a phone booth. They had them on the corners. I said, you can get you either a phone card or a whole pocket full of change.
Or make a collect call.
Yeah. And you'd sit there. I said, if you could find the right one, you could pull up to it and sit in your truck and do it, or on the tailgate, and mix you a drink and call everybody. Nice. They're like, what are you talking about? I said, you all are spoiled today.
Oh man, that's nuts. That's nuts. You're a well of stories from past experiences and now, and how this game has changed and how the luxuries have evolved over time, the things that haven't happened, and training probably without the modern conveniences of the training tools that we have today. You said a neat thing to me the other day. You said, I think everybody, for their sake, not to prove anything, but for their own education, they ought to have to train a dog without an electric collar. And that has stuck with me the last couple days. And correct me if I'm wrong, what you would learn from doing an exercise like that is you'd learn less about reactionary things from the animal. You'd learn more about the cognitive process in the animal's mind. Figure out what makes them tick to help them learn what you want them to know. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, and it'll help you read things and understand things. Yeah, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. And you may not get it done with the first one. You may not get it done with the second one. But it will teach you things that a dog does and why he does it, and help you understand. Like the technology today is grand. It is great. It is great. It has changed training completely.
It has.
But I think being able, we've became a disposable society.
Right.
So, it's not always the animal's fault. It's some of the techniques that we use. They're not all the same. And you might have the same problem, but you got to find another way around. And by training an animal without all technology, it's going to make you start to think about, how do I not create this problem?
Yeah.
How do I get around it? And how do I make this dog understand this is what I want? And so to me, it just helps you read. Yeah, you may not get him finished like you want him, but it will teach you a lot of things. And people, I grew up during the era where we didn't have tracking collars, and shock collars were just coming on the scene, and airplanes would go over and set them off. Electric fences would set them off. And a lot of dogs were run by the, electronics.
Yeah.
And not anybody's fault. But today, I think we became more of a disposable society instead of we don't want to take the time to work through a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just move on.
Yeah. If it's not instant gratification, people have a tendency to throw it by the wayside.
Yeah. And, I don't know, maybe it was the way I was raised. My biggest satisfaction was developing young dogs, from puppies all the way to finished dogs, and working problem dogs. Dogs that had holes in them.
Ah.
I loved it. I loved it because it made me try to figure out ways to, fix it.
Yeah. A problem dog requires you to dissect it.
Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that today. And there were dogs that I fixed that I went on and won a bunch with. And everybody would say, I don't know how you done it. I said, I don't know how you got it accomplished. I said, well, just, lots of things. Bird hunting, shooting birds.
There you go. I was going to say
I'm a 100% believer. Every field trial dog, you should be able to grab your shotgun and walk and shoot birds over all day long.
I almost croaked one time when I found a video on YouTube of you and several other gentlemen with your shotguns and you were foot hunting, but the dog that you guys were hunting behind was Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. I thought, oh my goodness, what are they doing? These dogs, they don't need to be doing. I didn't think they did this. I didn't think, what if he messes up? What if these birds? And you told me the other day, you start with bird hunting as the foundation. You really need bird hunting as the foundation to appreciate everything up from there. Build the trial dog from a bird hunting foundation and yourself, and go out from there.
Correct. Like I tell people, that's why they're called bird dogs.
Yeah, amen.
There's a reason why they're called a bird dog. And, walking behind them and shooting birds. And, if you do your job correct, they will know the difference between a field trial and a bird hunting situation.
Yeah, the good ones will figure it out.
And I always let my dogs retrieve. There'd be the odd one or two that I may not, because he was always on the bubble of falling over the edge. So,
Sure.
Maybe not, but I would walk out there and pick that bird up and come back, and I'd pull the head off and feed him the head. I was a big believer in that.
Yeah, yeah. You said something about Tocoa Mountain Sunrise. You told me a story there. Well, people have asked you, or were asking you, how do you get that dog or your dogs to stand so well through the flush? Because I was telling you, one of the things that I see a lot in our quick, instant manufactured, quick trained dogs is the dog goes on point, and one of the things is you go in, the dog starts to wilt. He starts looking around, the tongue's hanging out of his mouth, and maybe his tail's flagging a little bit, and he's going through the motions of something he's done a million times, and there's nothing there to kind of tingle his spine a little bit. And you said, well, my dogs, when they go on point, they're sitting there thinking, hey, I might get to get this thing in my mouth. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Is it going to fall? Is it going to fly away? And they literally stood there like they were on the edge of a cliff, because they were anticipating a very good thing to happen.
Correct. That's all positive. They're waiting for that bird to be in their mouth, to be praised. And, that's their getting praised is getting a bird in their mouth. You don't have to do it all the time, but just, do it, and, that's where the hunting part is very important. If you don't, if those dogs don't have a desire, to go get that bird, he don't have a desire to win a field trial.
Mm.
He may win, but that little extra special.
Right.
And like I said, you don't always have to let them retrieve, but walk out there, kill them a bird, make them stand there, kill them a bird, walk out there, pick it up, bring it back to them, and let them put their mouth on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't go to the same 40-acre field with the same launcher and the same silhouette and do the same thing over. Throw, the proverbial, throw the dog a bone, do something different, reward it, shoot a bird for it, go hunting for it, and all that.
Right. And, and that's very important in developing that desire in that dog.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree 100%.
And I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, think they ought to be broke by the time they're a year old.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that.
To me is like, they'll tell you when they're ready to be broke. If you can read a dog, he'll tell you when he's ready. And if you do all your foundation work, yeah, you can break them. But there's been a tremendous amount of dogs that went by the wayside that were pushed too early.
Yeah, and they wilt. A dog has a reservoir of what makes them awesome. And if you deplete that reservoir too early, meaning you're asking that dog to do things and putting pressure on that dog that it's not at a maturity level to handle that stress and that pressure and that asking, you're going to deplete that reservoir. And it's a lot easier to deplete it than it is to build it or refill it. And if you're tapping into that at a really early age and demanding that dog to be broke, steady to wing and shot, and he's a youngster, he's all he's interested is chasing butterflies and stuff like that.
Right.
You're gonna turn the dog into an accident rather than a product in the end. You're not gonna let that dog organically move forward.
And the thing is, that's why the breeding program is so important. You should look for them dogs that want a desire to do things for you early without a lot of pressure.
Oh.
That's, that should be part of your breeding program.
Yeah. You tell me a dog can retrieve and he can handle going foot hunting, but he'll run a country mile on the back of a horse. If he can handle all those things and he knows when to flip the switch on and off, That's clearly an indicator for a breed-on type individual. Like, take that and breed those on.
That should be your program.
Yeah, yeah. Not just the dog with the poker straight tail that can go out there and nail a homing pigeon. Anybody can do that. Get the dog that's got the full encompassment of what a bird dog is. Bird sense, stamina, composition, composure, and aesthetics. Put it all together. Don't just pick one or two.
Right. Well, and like I said, I think in the field trial world, we have lost, the shooting birds for dogs has kind of got away. I mean, growing up, all the old trainers, they all kill birds for their dogs. Right. All of them. But that's not the case today.
Yeah, I always heard stories about guys that were like kind of waiting in the wings on the call because they were waiting to see if they placed or they were not worried, but they thought maybe there'd be a callback, and they'd want to keep their dog right and keep them sharp. So a lot of those guys would go off to a neighboring plantation or neighboring grounds or to a buddy's grounds, and they'd kill some birds over that dog in the meantime in case they got called back, and they wanted to keep that dog's mind on birds.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you can go shoot birds for him. That's, like that video you're talking about, Sunrise.
Yeah.
That was prior to the National, a couple of days before he had to run there.
A couple of days. Wow. Awesome. Well, Rich, tell me about this. Educate me on this world. I'm aware of it, and I'm vaguely educated on it and keep up with it as best I can. But unfortunately, the world of the German Shorthair pointer, the English setter, and the English pointer, they kind of draw a line in the middle of them, and they kind of have their own territory and their own trials and stuff. Very rarely do they intertwine. Can you just tell me and my pointer and setter audience, and I've got a large German Shorthair following. It's amazing how often I hear from them. But tell me about where you're at with German Shorthairs this time, the arenas you play in, the sanctioning bodies, the trials and the championships. Tell me a little bit about what the Shorthair world looks like for you right now.
So the world I play in the German Shorthair world is called the NGSPA, not the AKC part of the German Shorthair world.
Okay.
Which is two different organizations. And the NGSPA run off the bylaws of the American field in the AFTCA. So their dogs range a lot more, cover a lot more country, do a lot of things. So when I came on scene, I saw some dogs and then, impressed with them. And so, when my boss talked me into doing it full time for him, I told him, I said, you're not probably going to understand my methods, but be patient and you'll see the end. And he did. And so in today's world, in an NGSPA dog world, the dogs that I created for him has kind of brought on another level, I think, in my mind. And those dogs, I've got people to judge for him now from the American field world. And they're like, oh my God, I never had a clue these dogs could run like this. They're like, yeah, they got short tails, but I mean, they will lay the front end out. They will come and go with you. They will point birds, and their endurance is gritty. And I mean, it's a fun world. I mean, it's a fun world. They've got some very, very good dogs, and they've created a very good breeding program amongst themselves to get that. My boss, all the dogs we run are they breed everything. They do not buy one dog.
Oh man, all in house. Wow.
Yeah. And so, there's a little difference between the world I run and the AKC world.
Right.
But they're fun dogs to work. They're gritty dogs. They're good bird dogs. And they can, like a lot of the pros and stuff that have seen them now, they could run with us.
Yeah, there's no reason why they couldn't. It's just been a flavor thing. I think it's just they have their own world. They're happy there. They've got their own things that mean what they mean to them, and there's no reason to cross over. I mean, there are Brian Gingrich and those guys will cross over and run in some trials, some pointer setter trials and stuff like that. And Josh Neiman and those guys have got great strings. There's a lot of those short hair guys that they've just got a real good thing going, and and they're super competitive. And those other breeds, the Brittany's have got dogs that would amaze you if you have
Oh
allowed
yeah.
stereotypes to take over your assumptions of these dogs. You need to go see the trial stock. It's one thing to see the trial stock and then to have the proverbial thing that your grandfather told you about that breed. There's some real hot
Right.
rods out there in the other breed. We're fortunate in the NBHA. We get to see a lot of these breeds in the walk-in ranks because they
Right.
intermingle a lot. And there's no different. It's just the length of the tail or the length of the fur on them. They do the
Right.
same things and they're just as competitive. So that's awesome. And you're the best person to ask this next question, Rich, as we kind of wind this down. We're desperately trying to grow the sport with whatever we can. All these different mediums, all this social media stuff, anything to get optics on our sport. But I want to ask you, somebody that has lived in this sport for a lifetime, not a set number of years, of lifetime, pointers, setters, German short hairs, all the different breeds that you have been around, the scouting, the judging, the handling, the training, the breeding. What does Rich Robertson Jr. feel like that the sport needs to do to grow itself?
I've been thinking this over, and I've been asked a bunch by people, and there's several things that come to mind. One of them that really comes probably home to me, growing up in this world of bird dogs. I remember as a kid, there was weekend trials and fun trials. Nope, not these big trials. Anybody could come with any kind of dog they wanted and run, and everybody welcomed them. And it was a big family deal.
Yeah,
I think we've lost that.
yeah,
Everybody wants a championship. Everybody wants to put one on, or they want to go on, and the cost of it is hurting the society in the bird dog world. And so the young people that have a bird dog that would like to come, they can't afford those big entry fees.
no, sure.
And I get it. But I think we need to go back there. I think we need to go back to having these little fun trials and stuff.
Yeah, the
And
gun
put them
dog
on.
stakes, the fun trials, the
Yeah.
youth stakes, all
Yeah.
that.
And I really, truly believe this. The pros, I don't care where they're at, what breed they are, whatever level, they need to attend those trials to help them people and give them advice and help them. And, everybody's too busy, but, to me, if you're in business, that's your future client, maybe.
Yeah, man, I'm thinking here, a lot of the guys that I have seen start in walking trials that maybe have moved on or branched out into horseback trials and stuff, that would have been prime pickings for some of our, pros, looking for new clientele or something
Oh yeah.
like that. I mean,
You don't have to look and see how big their checkbook is. You need to look and see how much desire they have. And I think we need to promote that. I don't care who you are, how much you want, and if you're stepping back and away from it, you should always be there to help that person enjoy what you enjoyed in your life.
almost like taking on a project dog, whether you buy a puppy or you start a started dog, that's going to be your project. I'm going to see what
Right.
this dog does, where it goes, and where it takes me. Maybe we should all have a focus too on people the same way. We should pick out that
Oh yeah.
person that we know that has that one dog that, he's just all he's doing is beating around for grouse in the season. But man, what if there's a chance that that guy could be a diehard field trialer in 5, 6, 7 years time, and he's really doing well and stuff. And you have to put out the olive branch and say, hey, just come try this. That's exactly what happened to me. My homeroom teacher, field trialer, said, hey, I know you got hunting dogs. Do you want to go to a field trial? Rich, I had no idea what I was going to. When I left that evening, put up those sweaty horses and those saddle blankets and put those dogs up, he just knew in the back of his mind that I would not go back. It'd been hot, it was rough riding, and it was a long day. Rich, I couldn't wait to go the next day. I was so amped I didn't sleep that night. But if he had never offered that, I don't
Right.
know where I'm at.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what we all need to do, And I always said, anybody new comes, they'll stand around there and look at them like they got the plague. And I was taught as a young child, always go up introduce yourself, shake their hand, and talk to them. And I always have done that my whole entire life.
Nice.
And that's what we all need to do.
Yeah.
And I'm a big, the negativity at a trial don't need to be there.
Yeah.
And the negative talking sometimes somebody needs to go over and say, hey, you need to knock it off.
Yeah. The condescending talk and the back, and that's in everything. Like anything you get involved in
I
with
don't
people.
I don't care what you do. It's always there.
Yeah.
But if somebody don't point it out sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then not trying to be ugly, just say, hey,
Chill
this
out.
new person over here, they're watching you.
Yeah. Yeah. Chill out a little bit, tone it down. Like,
Yeah.
Is it really that big a deal anyways? We got people here that we're trying to retain.
And I don't care. We've all been there. If anybody says they're not guilty of it, they are totally blind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. We all show our tail. We're all competitors or we wouldn't be doing this anyways. But
exactly,
we have to keep the bit in our mouth a little bit and kind of pull back and realize that the retention of somebody is more important than me stating my case about why my dog is gone or why he broke or whatever it was.
Or why he didn't place.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things anyways. What will matter is somebody else to bear the torch 10, 20 years from now. Rich, what's your advice for new trialers? I have a lot of new trialers asking questions, where to go, what to do. What's the kind of 30,000-foot advice that Rich Robertson has over a course of his career that he'd give to new trialers?
Well, and new trialers, bird hunters, whatever, go and try to be around people that has done it, and always have open ears, have your eyes open, and don't be afraid to ask the question to somebody. Don't be afraid to walk up to that person that's winning and say, hey, what do I need to do? Right. And the day you think you know it all, you're behind.
The day that you know it all is the day that you'll stop getting your picture taken.
Yeah, you'll be behind. And just, like I tell people, go there with an open mind. And you may not understand it, but ask questions. Yeah. Go to people. And, don't be afraid to stand off in the corner. Walk up and introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
And, just be part of it. But that's where the older trialers need to make a point to make them welcome.
Yeah, they should be like piranhas on them. When they see a new face, They should be all over them, all over them.
I mean, I can't think of the endless amount of people that I've done that to that came back to me in life. And they're like, you're the reason we're still here.
And all it was just a friendly handshake. Hello, hey, where are you from?
Or, or they were getting ready to run their dog and like, hey, you want some help?
Yeah. That's true. That's very true. Rich, 20 years from now, I don't know where you're at, what you're doing. 20 years is a long time from now, but you've had an experience and a career to kind of gather an opinion. Where do you see the sport 10, 20 years from now? What do you think this looks like? Is it still around? Does it look differently, or are we still on the same trajectory?
I think there'll be some change, but I see hope in a lot of things. I love to see what I've seen and been around a lot of people in the NBHA world, and I'm really happy what I see in their world and how they're growing.
Yeah,
and some of the young people coming, it makes me feel good. And I try to give advice when I'm around those people and help if I can.
Nice.
If they're and so I see a little more of that because of the availability of grounds, the cost of horses, the cost of equipment. It's gonna thin down, but you always have those people that want to step up to that next level. So, like I said, it's all about people starting down low and letting people decide where they want to be in life. And I think we all should come together. I don't care what you do and what level. We all should come together and help each other.
Yeah, no matter the format, doesn't matter what acronym you're running under. This game needs to proliferate, go on, and grow. And we don't do that in divided houses. We do that under one roof. And
Correct.
we've got such a good product to sell people because the upland community, the upland world is so big. It's so popular right now that, the harvest is ripe for reaping. I mean, it's time to get a hold
Oh
of
yeah.
those foot hunters and those guys that had dogs a couple years ago whose professional lives have changed and they're getting back into it. That we need to go after those people, gather them up, get them in a trial, get them in a saddle, get them in a side by side, whatever, and show them how awesome this game is and how it can extend its season, and then give you another chapter of your life that you would have never thought possible with regards to networks and friendships and dogs, just like yourself and the stories that you've told us. Rich, how can people find you, connect with you? Are you available? What kind of channels do you communicate with? If somebody wants to contact you and say thank you, or can you help me with this, how can people do that?
Well, like I said, I've kind of stepped back, but they can still find me. I don't keep a website or any of that. I have a cell phone, but I also have an email, and it's robertsonkennel@gmail.com.
Awesome.
And people can reach out to me. I'm always there. Like I tell, I'm not like breeding dogs near as much as I used to, and
Right.
but I'm always there for support,
Yeah.
advice, questions. It may take a little bit for me to get back to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not of the world of electronics. My family says they sometimes wonder why I even have a phone. I said, if it's important, they'll leave a message.
That's right. Hey, when your mornings start at 3:30 and they don't end till 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, like, it is what it is. That people can live with that if they'll just get a moment with you.
In my life now, like I said, I thought I was going to slow down, but it hasn't much. And I train the dogs for the Richardsons, and so I'm pretty busy with that.
Right.
And I manage their ranch. I'm pretty busy with that.
Sure.
And I run some cattle, so that keeps me a little spread thin. And then I try to have as much family time as I can.
Well, Rich, you've played the old man card on me several times in our conversations. You keep throwing around your age. Hey, I'm 66. I'm not a young buck. I can't do this. You're going pretty good for a 66-year-old. I don't see you slowing down very soon, and really, I don't think somebody like you does slowing down very well.
No, just like to try to do a few things that's on my list to do, and I still love to hunt. I'll never lose that desire to shoot birds.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I'm very fortunate to live where I do to have a good wild bird population.
You sure do. You sure do. And what a great way to wrap this up. Rich, this has been such a treat for me. The listeners are going to love to hear your stories and your accounts of these dogs and these things. So very special. I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this, especially in the circumstances that have befelled you and your family with the fire at the ranch and all that. It's a testament to your character and the upstanding of your personality in our world, in our community, and you're one of the titans of our game. Thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for the great memories and the stories and the influence you've had on our dogs, our world, and more importantly, our people.
Yes, sir. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I love talking about this, and the hard times I've had the last few days. This kind of puts a ray of sunshine on me about this world that is going to go on.
That's awesome. And I guarantee you're going to have some people reach out to you after they hear this, and they're gonna envelop you and keep it up. Hey, big fan, all this stuff. And this is why these stories and these accounts and these feelings and all these things need to go on some medium that we can share, because the more connected we are with the stuff that matters, family, hobbies like bird dogs and work, stuff that really matters, and not the stuff that the world kind of clouds our views with, the stuff that's superficial, the more good people we'll be.
Oh, I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
Awesome. Rich, thanks for coming on the podcast, buddy.
Thank you, Joe. I enjoyed it. Absolutely enjoyed it.
That was the Breakaway Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on everything National Bird Hunters Association and all other field trial related content. But hopefully, we'll see you next time at the Breakaway.